I call Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Like the previous speaker, I'm extremely troubled by the comments of the Leader of the House. In this call, I was going to congratulate the Office of Parliament Select Committee for finally responding to the request by the Office of the Ombudsman for increased resources. And I think the comprehensive review that the former Ombudsman, Chief Ombudsman Dame Beverly Wakeham did of 12 selected government agencies, a survey she did of ministers' offices, and the look at how the Act was being implemented elsewhere, showed that the major problem was not in the law itself, in the Official Information Act, but the way it was being implemented in the execution. And I think my memory of the interview with the new Chief Ombudsman was that he was simply pointing out that there were people in government agencies who were qualified in the law, therefore were in a position to understand very clearly what the Official Information Act meant, and that should assist in better execution of that Act. Now, the Ombudsman is an independent officer of this Parliament. They are absolutely critical in providing openness and transparency in our democracy, in balancing the rights of the citizen against the much larger powers of the state, in ensuring that government ministers and government departments are accountable. And I can only commend the work that the former Chief Ombudsman and the new Chief Ombudsman are doing in improving the way in which the Official Information Act is implemented, because we have seen under this government a 40% increase in complaints to the Office of the Ombudsman because, as the review that Dame Beverly did showed, there were major problems actually in the way that the Act was being implemented. Agencies were leaving it to the last minute, taking the full 20 days before they released information. They were claiming extensions. We have seen there were often, when we make requests, there are large areas of blacked out text redactions. And now we've seen agencies like the Reserve Bank and others, local councils, charging requesters for information, knowing very well that $200 or $300 or sometimes even more to provide information will create a significant barrier to getting that information and to calling the government agency to account. We have seen the Northland Environmental Protection Group, which is trying to hold the Ministry of Primary Industries to account for the way in which it is operating under the Forest Act for the major exports of ancient swamp kauri, which are potentially being contrary to that Act. They had to go to the High Court to get the High Court to adjudicate that MPI should release emails and other information. This Official Information Act is critical to our democracy, so that the work that the Office of the Ombudsman is doing to improve compliance with the Act is important for a much more effective democracy. The Parliament is being asked in the budget to recommend, I think it's a $2.3 or $2.6 million increase in the budget of the office. The Chief Ombudsman provided the Select Committee with a very detailed analysis of where the extra money was required. Funding's being needed for some additional investigators to get on top of the backlog of, I think it's about 600 requests which have been with the office for more than a year and sometimes up to 6 years. That is commendable, that the office is seeking to deal with that backlog so it can go and do more of the types of reviews that Dame Beverly initiated, so that it can be proactive rather than always being reactive. Because if we don't have the work of the office being adequately resourced, then the sorts of practices that came to light in the review become systemic. That undermines public trust in government agencies, their administration of the law, and it's in all of our interests for the government to be accountable, to be transparent, because that encourages public confidence. So I am deeply troubled by the Leader of the House's comments, and I think the Select Committee should be congratulated for its work in making this recommendation for increased funding, which the Green Party is very happy to support.